This week has kind of gone by with a blur, and we hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, had way too much turkey and all the fixings aside of it, but we're going back to Okinawa. That's right. I ended the last video talking about going down to Okinawa and going diving, staying at the Marriott Renaissance there. Onna Village, which is a really neat, cool spot there. The more I think about it, the more I realize, the diving there was similar to looking at this aquarium with these incredible colors with the orange lenses on. Just look how beautiful it is today. It's just so spectacular. It kind of reminds me of diving on a real living coral reef aquarium. You've got your beautiful acros and your montiporas. It's not necessarily like that when you're diving because a lot of the color gets washed out. I mean, it's just so fascinating that we can grow tremendous living coral reef aquariums and we get to go diving and see it all. So we went diving there, went walking down towards Onna Village, found a dive shop. They spoke English really well. There was a gal there who had lived in Palau and who had moved back towards Japan to Okinawa. Her and her husband, they're both in the dive industry. So we really started communicating with them at the dive shop. And one of the first things that happened was, my gosh, she looked at us and she said, well, how old are you guys? I said, oh yeah, I'm 63. Do you guys have health certificates? I said, well, we're healthy for sure. And it was kind of a funny interaction. They brought the manager over. He looked at us and realized, hey, these guys got dives out of their ears. I showed him video footage of Australia and the Maldives and all this great diving that we've been on. So we got cleared to dive, organized for the next day. We get going, met at the dive center first, went to the marina and got on a panga, going out on our first dive over to the Blue Hole, which is a famous spot over in this area by Onna Village. You take the boat over a few miles to the other side of this trench, and boom, we went in the water with our dive guide who barely spoke any English whatsoever. We got good with our hand signals, meaning that everything's okay, and then proceeded to dive. We saw green chromis out of our ears. There were clownfish and anemones and carpet anemones with ocellaris. I saw pink skunks and other types of anemones. There were tomato clowns and sea bay clowns. And we went into that dive. We went to the Onna Village Coral Farm, which is these iron steel rods, like building construction rods with like some cups on them that they hammer into the ground. They put coral plugs on them with acroporid species mainly, whether it's plating acropores or tabling acropores or all sorts of different types of acropores on this vast area, which was really tremendous. They had some coral issues back in 23 during the kind of global heat wave that also affected these shallow water corals, but there were still plenty of healthy heads with, I'm talking thousands of blue-green chromis on an edge, and you could see all of these incredible fish. They were everywhere, and healthy corals abound. I saw flounders in the bottom, saw a neat clear trumpet fish, had a Titan trigger off that kind of circled around and came back at us. There were tridacna clams all over in these shallow rocks that were in place. There was blue damsels that were there. We saw green acroporids, really nice tabling acropores that were there. There were some sea cucumbers in the sandy areas around this space. There were striped damsels. We found regular Volatan lions, then we saw some Fu Manchu lions as well. There were goatfish. There was neat little banded goby and gobies with the commensal shrimp digging trenches together. There was purple acropores in there, several species of butterfly fish, Christmas tree worms. And in that dive, it was mainly shallow, but in the deeper dives, even when we went to the Blue Cave, there was a Koran angelfish, colorful wrasses of all different types. Up on the top of the ridge, there was that clown tang. When we went down towards the cave, there was a flame scallop in there. There was electric ones that kind of pulsed this electric field of light energy. We We saw rabbitfish, nasotangs, found a barred soapfish on that dive, lots of plate corals, beautiful lobophilias with the pink edge or red edges and gray centers, and just loads of fish on that very first dive. So the first day we were just so excited, went back to the hotel, got some great footage. Joleen got a lot of great stills as well. Just were thrilled to be finally in another ocean in Japan. The weather was clear, the water was clean, the food was great, the people were super nice, and we had booked with another boat for the following day. So in traditional form, they're going to take you to the deeper dive first. So we went back over towards the area of the blue hole and anchored a few hundred yards away in another spot. Seemed like shallower, but it was an area that went down deeper. And I had mentioned to them that we'd like to see coral. So they took us down this ridge and over to this very long, I'm going to call it almost football field long, coral bomby that went for at least 100 yards or 150 yards that way. And it got deeper as it went. So you could see down over here on the floor is about 100 feet, and up on the top of the ridge it was somewhere near 50, maybe 60 feet. So we stayed within like 75 foot, back up to 60, 50 feet. And on that dive, it was just amazing the amount of coral. We spotted a Bowers parrotfish, a monocle brim. Tongue corals were all over the place, and plating fungia corals. As a matter of fact, I found a tongue coral that looked really nice, and I picked it up, literally thousands on this dive. I figured, oh, stick it in my wetsuit or BC pocket, but nah, I put it back. I couldn't take it with me because there's no way I could be caught with a piece of coral in Japan. Found a really beautiful red chalice coral. There was more red and gray lobophilias, pairs of foxface. There were gonoporas. Ran into a couple different turtles. Had one under a ledge, and then he finally came out, and Joleen and the dive master were taking pictures of it. And then he came out and I saw him coming around back at me. And then he started swimming up towards the surface to get a breath of fresh air. Kept diving down the edge. I found lots of acroporas. There was beautiful plate corals and montoporas that grow in this spiral area, just loaded corals on top of corals. Found some great pipe organ coral. I touched that to make sure what I knew was underneath it. Wasn't sure at first, but then I realized it is pipe organ coral. Found ornate butterflies, found a really nice orange, small little fungia disc coral. The area there, because it was so much deeper, probably is not impacted by the massive swells that are coming during a typhoon from the really deep water near shore in Japan. And then it comes up because all that is probably old volcanic islands that go up really high, like small mountains. So the topography might have 20-foot swells coming in and crashing at the rocks. So the deeper it is, like 60 foot, 50 foot, 90 foot, 80 foot, you see a lot more coral that doesn't get damaged by these massive, huge surfable waves. Found some really nice different ridge corals, which were really super cool, coming back up the dive area, and went back a little shallower to try to end our dive with a little decom stop at 15 feet, and ended up with a really incredibly beautiful super male sunset wrasse kind of going all around right at me. It was pretty cool to see that. Went back in, which they traditionally do, had a nice bento box for lunch, and they take you in with intent to get you out of the water for an hour, hour and a half. Then they take you back out in the boat again. So the second dive was going back towards the Onna Village coral farm, but a little different spot and down to a little deeper spot. And on that dive, which was going to be our last dive of the trip, there was lots of Tridacna clams around, a Dorasa clam around. Again, the same thing, anemones, big, beautiful chorus wrasse around. I found a turtle in the coral rocks, actually chewing on the coral and chewing through, whether he was eating worms in the coral or whatever, but he was chomping through, you could hear him chomping through the coral and kind of spitting it out. Found a really beautiful purple rimmed fungia that was upside down. I flipped that back over, saw a neat gray puffer, another small lionfish, and again, just corals after corals after corals, green chromis everywhere, just really incredible. So we ended our diving there right by the boat, back circled around towards the boat, and sure as heck, there was a beautiful carpet anemone right there in about 6-8 feet of water with several Ocellaris clowns just kind of basking in the sunlight under and in their bed of this anemone. Just so beautiful of a memory of the last dive of our trip there to Okinawa. So it was just a fabulous day and ended with a really nice sunset there by the waterway. Joleen and I were there for 5 nights at this hotel. The next morning, we planned our last day there, which was a Sunday. Obviously, we're not going to dive the day before we go fly again. So we went to the Churaumi Aquarium. Which is a good hour and a half away north on Okinawa, which is a really famous aquarium there on an Ocean Expo Park or Ocean Park there on the coast way to the north in Okinawa. And it was just stunning, really an incredible aquarium. You gained entry, walked in, and the first thing you see was this beautiful curving walled reef aquarium that had to be, I'm gonna say, at least 100 foot of acrylic panels, probably 4 inches thick. There was natural sunlight. You could see the light shimmering on the floor of the reef. There was a big blue-faced angel in there. There was whole bunches of blue-eyed cardinal fish, the little glassy cardinals, and some really delicate acroporas. So it obviously has been growing like this for years. So then you went down this area through different areas of larger fish aquariums, maybe from the open ocean style. Like there was a big, huge humphead wrasse sitting there getting cleaned from the cleaner wrasses that were there. Sometimes I think they call that fish too a broomtail wrasse. It took you down and further down, and then suddenly it opens up and you're there. You're looking at this 2 million gallon open ocean style massive aquarium with, I don't know, probably a 30-foot whale shark in there, at least 28 feet. Huge whale shark, look really fabulous, loaded with manta rays, all sorts of different types of stingrays, lots of schooling fish in there. There was big yellowtail, Pacific yellowtail. There was even a mahi-mahi that swam by. It had to have been 20-pound bull mahi swimming through the huge reef aquarium. As we're going along, I heard them announce something in Japanese, and people started paying attention and looking out the window and stuff, and I figured, oh, and they're feeding the whale shark first in the middle of the aquarium with a scoop, right? So they're feeding it the plankton that they have prepared in a scoop. This is how they've normally been doing it. It was interesting. The stingrays all went to the bottom of the aquarium, and they were dropping in food that was sinking all the way to the bottom, and the rays were eating on the floor of the aquarium. And then we walked around the other edge, and we're waiting there, and the other girl was saying something in Japanese, and they started feeding the manta rays from the top, like a big scoop of this planktonic oranges type food, and the manta rays would come by and literally engulf all of that food right above our heads. So that was super cool. I was getting a little hungry. I said to Joleen, we should go down. There's a restaurant down there. I could see it, and order some food. And we sat down and watched through the windows on a reserved seating. I think we got fish and chips, actually. Sat there and just, were mesmerized, enjoying our final day there in Okinawa. What an incredible journey to go see the coral reef in Okinawa and recognize that there's beautiful, healthy coral reefs around the world that we've got to dive at. And this was just another ideal spot. took a taxi back to the hotel, which was certainly a lot easier than renting a car there, and made it back and had our last evening in Okinawa, got on the airplane and through the Okinawa airport, which there was great orchids throughout the whole airport. On the way back to the plane and got on the plane and headed back to Tokyo. We spent another night in Tokyo, then woke up that next morning and got on Japan Airlines again over to take a 5.5-hour flight to Guangzhou, China, which was super cool. Wait till you see the SIP show. That was awesome for sure. Remember to like, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.